This is India Tonight. And yes, we're talking about India's pay disparity now. The pay disparity in the country is clearly on the rise. It is really sparking calls for a reset. According to a study conducted by Deloitte, Nifty 50 CEO compensation has skyrocketed. It has gone up 20%, and it's happened in just 1 year's time. So now, one out of every 5 CEOs and MDs, earn more than 50 crore rupees. And this has happened in the last fiscal. Compare that to what was reported just about 5 years ago. It was 1 out of every 10 years that we were looking at this kind of salary payout. Meanwhile, entry-level salaries for engineers, they seem to have stagnated. So why is this disparity? Why is it happening? Why are we seeing growth only at the top of the hierarchy? That's a question I'd like to pose to Dinkar Pawan. He's the director at Deloitte India. He joins us on India Tonight. Mr. Pawan, good to have you on the show. What is the value, Mr. Pawan, that is associated with CEOs, with managing directors who draw these big, hefty salaries that can justify this kind of payout? Don't shareholders have a right to ask them?
Of course they do, and they do ask tough questions. As we say in the report, the median market cap of a Nifty 50 company is roughly 3 lakh crore. So these high pay packets also come with a great deal of responsibility. Imagine being at the helm of a company that is worth 3 lakh crore, and you will have investors and shareholders from all types of shareholders, short-term and long-term, holding you responsible for both the short-term and the long-term performance of the company. So it's a job that comes with its fair share of responsibilities.
Certainly would appear so, because if you have that kind of payout, you would imagine that the responsibilities, the vision that you bring to the table for a company is going to be enormous. But why do you reckon we have this scenario where 1 out of every 5 CEO and MD in India earns more than 50 crore rupees, while entry-level employee wages, even for engineers, have more or less stagnated? Because this is what the economic survey has been saying. It has been presented just before the budget this time. It says that corporate profits have grown nearly 4x, but not employee salaries. Why is there such a strong mismatch, you think?
So two things. From a CEO compensation perspective, the trend that we see is the following. As organizations become larger in size, we see a positive correlation between the size of the organization and the CEO compensation. If we take the Nifty 50 companies that we have actually sampled, revenue has become 1.7x of what it was 5 years back. PAT has become over 2x of what it was 5 years back. And therefore, the CEO compensation growth has been in line with the underlying financial growth of these particular companies. Whereas if you take the entry-level salaries, or even, let's say, the median salaries in these companies, the growth has been much lower. One big reason why the growth in median salaries as well as the entry-level salaries is not that high is because CEO compensation is actually in part driven by incentives. And more than half of the CEO compensation, in fact, is actually driven by incentives. And the senior you are in the system, the more you have pay at risk. And therefore, they have a higher proportion of bonuses. The payment is actually also linked to the share price, because almost a quarter of the CEO pay is given in the form of shares. So as the value of the shares go up, the compensation also rises. And this aspect is completely missing from entry-level salaries as well as the median salaries in the company.
But what are corporates doing to kind of ensure that there isn't such a strong mismatch? Because if you're looking at, yes, if you're paying out by way of shares and entry level, you don't get that option. But the thought process is that if a company is doing well, its profitability is rising, and the kind of vision for the future is strong for growth for the company, then that should get reflected at every level of management, isn't it?
Absolutely. And while I would not say that this is the only factor, but this has become one of the key factors that goes into discussion in the nomination remuneration committee meetings or the board meetings these days. Of course, the factors that influence compensation decision making for the CEOs include factors such as the size and scale of the company, what are other CEOs getting paid. Organizations are very active with respect to benchmarking the CEO compensation levels. They also are very active in looking at the performance of the company in totality and correlating that with CEO compensation changes. As far as the entry level compensation as well as the median remuneration of employees is concerned, that's not a factor that I have seen that companies are actively using to determine CEO pay. And India is frankly going the route of the US, wherein the CEO to median remuneration of employees, that ratio keeps going up. And in fact, in India, it is now comparable to what we see in the US at somewhere between a 250 to 300 level.
But you did mention that responsibility is the key reason why the top management draws the kind of payouts that they do eventually get. I'm just wondering if there has been a spike in responsibility, because there is certainly a spike when it comes to salaries and payouts.
Of course, and one measure of responsibility is the scale of operations you manage. Like I mentioned, these organizations, the Nifty 50 companies that we've sampled, have almost doubled over the last 5 years. If you take Nifty 50 as an index, it has grown by more than 2x over the last 5 years. And therefore comes the increased responsibility as well. What also should be remembered is the fact that when we talk about things such as median remuneration of employee or entry level salary, it is not the same person every year, right? So if you are joining these companies at an entry level, or if you are at the median level in the company, then if you stick around for 5 years, as you gain more skills and experience, your compensation also rises, and particularly rises at a faster rate at a junior management level. But I agree with your point that the entry level salaries have not moved as much as the changes we have observed in the CEO pay.
Mr. Pawan, when you talk about longevity, when people are staying in a company for longer, are you seeing the phenomenon where they don't? Because we are talking about higher attrition levels, and perhaps the rise of contractual workers as well could be responsible. What are the changes in terms of employment that we are seeing across companies, across sectors, that do explain why this stagnancy when it comes to entry-level salaries?
From our perspective, it is a demand-supply game. Compensation is nothing but price. It is a function of how many people are willing to provide their services at a particular compensation level and how many jobs are there for that particular level. The question also has to be asked about the skill level at the entry level. Are employees which are joining entry level jobs, are they ready to perform from day one, or do they have to undergo a period of training before they start contributing actively? These are factors, in my view, which influence the entry level compensation levels. But like I said, I agree with your point that the disparity has gone up over time. And this is actually becoming a factor that organizations are taking cognizance of. But this is one of the factors that influences CO pay, not the entire thing.
What is the downside? If we are not going to correct this kind of trend, what's the downside that you see?
CEO compensation, for good or bad reasons, is public. So it may lead to some level of dissatisfaction and some level of a feeling of unfairness, if I can call it, for entry level employees or median remuneration of employees. Apart from that, we are talking about the top 40, 50 individuals in the company leading in the country, leading the top 40, 50 leading companies in the country. So there's bound to be a massive difference between the compensation of folks leading these organizations and folks who are joining these organizations at an entry level.
The reverse argument is that you need to be incentivized to kind of stay with a company, and that kind of vision only top management can afford. Recently, we were talking about Cognizant's recent off-campus hiring program. It was offering an entry-level salary of 2.5 lakhs, which drew a lot of attention on social media because of the entry-level salary offer of 2.5 lakh rupees per annum for fresh graduates. So in the sense of sectors, is it vastly different as well? Because we see in your report as well, consumer and IT, these are the companies in certain sectors that seem to be drawing that much more heavy pay packages for top management.
Yeah, we actually see two sectors where the CEO compensation is particularly higher. That is heavy manufacturing as well as IT services. That has got to do with two main factors. One is the size of these companies. These companies are some of the largest even within the Nifty 50 cohort. And also the fact that particularly in IT services, you find that the CEO is actually based in many cases outside of India. So the compensation numbers that you see are actually in INR when the CEO is actually paid in USD or GBP. So this is one reason why the CEO compensation is higher in these sectors. By and large, what we've observed is that some of the labor-intensive industries, for example, IT services, tend to have a relatively lower median remuneration of employees or entry-level salaries, given the sheer volume of individuals or employees they're hiring at an entry level. And therefore, that sometimes kinds of suppresses the entry-level pay or the median remuneration of pay, making the gap that much higher.
Mr. Pawan, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on this. It's the kind of trend you were indicating the downside, and it needs to be corrected. That's something that we'll be working on and bringing up this issue from time to time. Thanks very much for joining us with the details of your report.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.